The crystal glasses clinked as James Wilson raised his fourth toast of the evening. The dining room of his mansion buzzed with the chatter of Milwaukee's manufacturing elite, gathered to celebrate his company's latest acquisition. I sat quietly beside my wife, Emma, observing the scene while nursing a single glass of wine. To Wilson Manufacturing's continued dominance. James announced, his designer suit perfectly pressed despite the late hour. And to our newest expansion into the Asian markets. My brother-in-law had always been fond of grand gestures, the $200,000 car in his driveway, the vacation homes, the private jet, all carefully cultivated symbols of his success. I adjusted my modest suit, purchased off the rack at Macy's, and felt his gaze fall on me. "David," he called out, deliberately drawing attention to our end of the table. Still pushing those industrial supplies door to door. My wife, Emma, tensed beside me. After 3 years of marriage, she'd grown weary of her brother's constant jabs at my profession. What James didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that my simple sales job was merely the visible tip of a much larger operation. "Business is steady," I replied evenly. "Companies always need supplies." James's wife, Victoria, tittered behind her hand. "Imagine that, darling. Going business to business with a catalog. How quaint." What they saw was a man driving around in a company car, carrying sample cases of industrial parts and supplies. What they didn't see was Global Supply Network, the international corporation I'd built over the last 15 years. My ownership was carefully hidden behind holding companies and shell corporations, allowing me to observe the industry from the ground level while controlling one of the largest supply chain networks in the world. "You know," James continued, swirling his expensive bourbon, "we always have openings in our sales division. Something more substantial, with a real future." Emma started to speak, but I touched her arm gently. She'd wanted me to reveal my position years ago, but I'd insisted on maintaining my cover. It allowed me to evaluate potential partnerships without bias, to see how companies really operated when they thought they were dealing with a simple salesman. "I appreciate the offer," I said, sampling the overpriced steak. "But I'm comfortable where I am." "Comfortable?" James scoffed. "That's the problem with your generation. No ambition. While I'm building a global manufacturing empire, you're content peddling nuts and bolts." If only he knew that his entire production line depended on components supplied through my subsidiaries, or that we just acquired controlling interest in 3 major raw material suppliers his expansion plans relied on. Speaking of building, Victoria chimed in, "James, tell everyone about the Asian venture." James's face lit up. "We're finalizing deals to establish manufacturing facilities across Southeast Asia. Complete vertical integration. Raw materials to finished products. Once that's locked in, we'll dominate the market." I sipped my wine, thinking about the supply contracts sitting on my desk, the ones with questionable labor practices and undisclosed quality control issues. The ones that had somehow passed initial review despite missing key certification documentation. "Must be nice having such a simple job," Victoria said, turning to me. "No real responsibility. Not like James, managing thousands of employees and global operations." "It has its moments," I replied. "Moments?" James laughed. "The biggest decision you make is which customer to visit first. Meanwhile, I'm orchestrating international manufacturing networks. Tell me, what exactly do you think about during those long hours in your little sales car?" "Supply chains, quality control. Making sure companies get what they need to operate efficiently." "Supply chains." James's voice dripped with condescension. "You think you understand manufacturing better than my team. We have consultants from McKinsey, executives from Fortune 500 companies. But please, enlighten us with your door-to-door sales insights." Emma started to defend me, but I shook my head slightly. "Actually, James, I notice things like when factories run inefficiently due to poor component quality, or when supply delays create costly production shutdowns. Small details that impact the bottom line. Something flickered across James's face, irritation, but it vanished quickly, replaced by his usual arrogance. "Well," he said, standing to grab another drink, "thankfully the real decisions are made by people who understand global business, not salesmen playing at being experts." I helped Emma collect her things after dinner, while James continued boasting about his business acumen to anyone within earshot. She apologized again for her brother's behavior, but I just kissed her cheek and assured her it was fine. "He just wants what he thinks is best for you," I said, "by treating my husband like he's beneath him. He measures success in a particular way. Anything else doesn't compute." Later that night, driving home to our comfortable but modest house, purchased with my visible income, not my hidden wealth, Emma was unusually quiet. "You never let him get to you," she said finally. "How do you stay so calm?" I thought about the contract reviews scheduled for Monday, about the meetings with international suppliers, about the things James Wilson didn't know about his brother-in-law. "Perspective," I said. "Everyone defines success differently." The next morning, while Emma was at her job as a high school teacher, I drove to my real office. Not the sales depot where James imagined I spent my days, but the top floor of a discreet office building downtown. My actual workspace, where I ran Global Supply Network. My executive assistant, Marcus, was waiting with updates. Wilson Manufacturing's Asian expansion contracts are ready for final review. The board meets Monday at 9 a.m. I spent Sunday reviewing every detail of James' expansion plans. The numbers were troubling. His company had underestimated material costs, ignored critical quality control standards, and made production commitments that were logistically impossible. His prestigious consultants had either missed these issues or, more likely, helped conceal them. "Get me everything we have on Wilson Manufacturing's other operations," I told Marcus. "All subsidiaries and partner companies." The pattern emerged quickly. James had been taking dangerous shortcuts, using aggressive pricing to win contracts, then making up the difference by sourcing substandard materials and ignoring safety protocols. The Asian expansion wasn't going to grow his business. It was a desperate gamble to generate enough cash flow to cover mounting operational losses. Sunday evening, I kissed Emma goodbye as she prepared lesson plans for her classes. She thought I was heading to organize my sales samples for Monday's route. Instead, I went to my office to prepare for Monday's board meeting, not as James Wilson's brother-in-law, but as CEO of Global Supply Network, the position I'd kept hidden for years. Tomorrow would change everything, for my family, for Wilson Manufacturing, and for the quiet salesman who had built an empire in silence. The Shanghai skyline glowed through the conference room windows as executives from across the globe connected to the virtual board meeting. The clock struck 8:55 a.m., and screens lit up with faces from Tokyo, Seoul, Berlin, and New York, the power players in global manufacturing and supply chain management. James Wilson's image appeared on the main display, surrounded by his team of international consultants and lawyers. His confident smile froze when he saw me sitting at the head of the virtual meeting table. "David? What is this?" "This is a closed meeting for manufacturing executives. Mr. Anderson is the founder and CEO of Global Supply Network," the board chairman stated matter-of-factly. "He's been instrumental in developing our Asian supply infrastructure." "That's ridiculous," James sputtered. "He's a traveling salesman. He sells industrial supplies from a catalog." "Perhaps we should proceed with the presentations," I suggested calmly. "Wilson Manufacturing is scheduled first." For the next hour, I'd watch James stumble through his proposal. Every time he mentioned material costs or production timelines, his eyes darted to my screen, suddenly uncertain of figures he'd been so confident about at dinner. When his presentation ended, I leaned forward. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson." Now I'd like to address some concerns about Wilson Manufacturing's operational practices. Methodically, I laid out everything. The substandard materials, the falsified quality reports, the safety violations I documented across their existing facilities. Years of quiet observation, gathered while James mocked my simple sales job, had painted a damning picture. In essence, I concluded, this expansion plan is built on systematic violations of international manufacturing standards, worker safety regulations, and quality control protocols. These are lies, James shouted, his face reddening. He's just a salesman. What could he possibly know about international manufacturing? The chairman raised his hand. Mr. Wilson, please maintain professional decorum. Professional? He's been spying on my company, using family connections to gather insider information. Actually, I replied quietly, everything in my presentation comes from standard industry monitoring and public records, the kind of things anyone would notice if they were actually visiting their factories instead of just their boardrooms. During the brief recess that followed, James called my private line. Why? He demanded. All these years, playing the humble salesman. Was it all just to destroy me? No, James. It was about building something legitimate. Something based on real quality, not just appearances. You think you're better than me, more ethical. I think I chose to learn the business from the ground up. When was the last time you actually walked your factory floors, talked to your workers, checked your materials personally? There was a long pause. We can make a deal. A partnership. Your supply network, my manufacturing base. Your manufacturing base is about to face serious quality control investigations, which will happen after today's revelations. You do this to family. Family. I laughed softly. You've spent years treating me like I was beneath you, like selling supplies was something shameful. The board's decision was unanimous. Wilson Manufacturing's expansion plans were rejected, and their existing operations would face immediate quality control audits. As the virtual meeting ended, James's screen remained lit. Emma will never forgive you for this, he said. For what? Building an ethical business? Protecting workers? Or exposing practices that could have gotten people killed? Back in my office, Marcus brought updates. Major clients were already questioning their contracts with Wilson Manufacturing. Stock prices were dropping as news spread about the failed expansion and pending investigations. My phone buzzed. Emma. James just called Victoria, she said. He's saying incredible things about you, about some global company. Can you come home early? There's something I need to explain, about my real work and about your brother's business. Real work? David, what's happening? You deserve the whole truth. I'll explain everything. After hanging up, I walked to the window, watching the factory complex below. James had never understood that true success isn't measured in quarterly profits or stock prices, but in building something valuable and sustainable. Marcus, I called out, activate our contingency plans for Wilson Manufacturing's supply chain. If they start failing, we need to ensure their workers and legitimate operations are protected. Already in motion, he replied. And David? Good luck with Emma. I nodded, gathering my thoughts for the conversation ahead. Explaining to my wife why I'd maintained this facade for so long, why I'd let her brother demean me rather than reveal the truth. As I drove home in my modest car, still maintaining appearances until I could explain everything to Emma, I passed one of my company's supply trucks. The driver waved, not knowing he was greeting the owner of the company, just like I'd wanted it all these years. Now to find out if protecting my principles had cost me something more valuable than any supply chain empire. I found Emma in our home office, surrounded by her students' essays, but her attention was fixed on her laptop displaying Wilson Manufacturing's plummeting stock price. When she looked up, her expression was a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. That industrial supply catalog on your desk, she said. The one you said helped start your career. It's actually the first global supply network catalog I completed. Every product listing was real. I just didn't tell you how far the company had grown. She pushed aside her students' papers. 7 years. 7 years of watching James belittle you at every family gathering. Of defending you to Victoria. Of feeling embarrassed when they talked about business success. I know. And I'm sorry for not being completely honest. Our first apartment. The budget discussions. All those stories about difficult sales calls. I made every sales call I talked about, I said quietly. Learned every aspect of the business, from warehouse operations to international supply chains. Built global supply network from the ground up, understanding every component. Emma walked to her desk and pulled out a business magazine featuring James on the cover. Wilson Manufacturing. Revolutionizing global production. I kept this to remind myself that success isn't everything, she said. That teaching and your sales job were honest work. And all this time, I sat beside her. Remember what James said in that interview? About success being measured in acquisitions and market dominance. She nodded. That's exactly why I chose to do things differently. To build something based on quality and integrity, not just profits. Then I met you. At that teacher's conference, she smiled, selling educational supplies. You were different. Passionate about teaching, caring about your students' futures, wanting to make a real difference. You never once questioned my career choice. Because I loved you, not your job title. She paused. Though apparently I didn't know your actual title. Every sales story was real. Every customer interaction genuine. I just didn't mention that I owned the company. But why keep up the pretense? Year after year of James's condescension. I moved to our window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd chosen to live, far from the exclusive areas James preferred. At first, it was about principles, wanting to succeed on merit, not appearances. Then it became about building something the right way. Then you were too deep in the deception to explain without looking dishonest. Something like that. Emma joined me at the window. Tell me about Global Supply Network. Everything. For the next hour, I explained it all. The focus on quality control, the ethical sourcing initiatives, the worker safety programs, the technology investments that made us more efficient than competitors. With each detail, I watched her expression shift from hurt to understanding. So when James was cutting corners, I knew because I'd seen the problems firsthand. Had teams documenting violations, tracking substandard materials. And today's meeting, we rejected his expansion because it was dangerous, built on compromising safety and quality for profit. Emma checked her phone, likely seeing dozens of missed calls from her family. Will this company survive? That depends on him. If he's willing to accept help, to learn to do things properly. And if he refuses, then his company will likely fail. But that's his choice. She reached for my hand. Our house, my teaching salary. All real choices we made together. But I've matched every dollar you've earned in a separate account, for that educational foundation you've always dreamed of starting. That stopped her. What? Check your email. The foundation details are there. It's in your name only. Use it however you want. Emma sat quietly for a moment, looking around our modest home office where she'd graded countless papers and I'd planned countless sales routes. I understand why you did it, she said finally. The principle behind it. I even respect it. But no more secrets. No more secrets, I promised. Though I might still make sales calls occasionally, keeps me connected to what matters. She laughed softly. My complicated, principled husband. Building a global empire while actually selling supplies. My phone buzzed. James calling again. Emma glanced at it. He can wait, she said. I need to know one more thing. What's that? That day at the teachers' conference, Was that really just chance? I smiled. The CEO of Global Supply Network, personally selling educational supplies at a small regional conference. What do you think? I think, she said, moving closer, that I fell in love with a salesman who turned out to be exactly who he seemed, just with a slightly bigger sales territory than I imagined. I pulled her close. I love you. I love you too. But tomorrow? Tomorrow. Tomorrow, you're helping me plan that educational foundation. CEO or salesman, you're still my husband. Messages kept lighting up both our phones from James, from Victoria, from business associates suddenly discovering who I really was. But they could wait. Right now, I was exactly where I needed to be, with the one person who had loved me for who I was, not what I owned. Even if she was already making plans to put my supply chain empire to work for her educational dreams. 1 month later, I sat across from James in Global Supply Network's Singapore office, watching him sign the restructuring agreement. His company hadn't collapsed completely, but the quality control investigations had revealed problems that couldn't be ignored. He'd finally accepted my offer. A supervised integration that would preserve jobs while implementing proper standards. So that's it, he said, putting down the pen. You're in charge now. Not exactly, I replied. You'll remain as regional director. Your manufacturing experience has value, James. It just needs proper guidance. He straightened his still expensive tie, though the swagger was noticeably diminished. Why help me at all? After everything. Because you're family, and because sometimes people deserve a second chance to do things right. Emma had arranged a family dinner that evening at our home, the first since the truth emerged. Victoria arrived first, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. Her social media presence had taken a hit when her posts about my brilliant businessman brother suddenly featured the wrong brother-in-law. Your home is charming, she managed, examining what she previously dismissed as inadequate. Very authentic. It is, Emma replied, handing her a glass of wine. Amazing what you see when you stop focusing on appearances. James arrived last, looking uncomfortable in our modest dining room. But he came, and that meant something. Before we eat, I announced, I want to share something. Global Supply Network is launching a new initiative, quality educational supplies for underfunded schools. Emma squeezed my hand. We've been developing this project together, combining her teaching experience with my supply chain expertise. The Emma Anderson Education Foundation, I continued. Because success isn't just about moving products. It's about delivering what matters. James cleared his throat. I'd like to help, if you let me. Share what I've learned about what not to do. We'd welcome that, Emma said softly. Victoria raised her glass. To new beginnings. And to seeing what was always there, James added, speaking with genuine humility for perhaps the first time I could remember. Later, after everyone had left, Emma and I sat on our back porch, enjoying the evening quiet. We could move now, she said. Buy something bigger. Do you want to? She looked around at the neighborhood where her students often stopped to chat. No, this is home. Just like your sales routes are part of who you are. Speaking of which, I checked my phone. I'm visiting that new technical school tomorrow. Want to come along? The CEO of Global Supply Network personally demonstrating equipment. Best way to stay connected to what matters. Emma smiled. Pick me up after my last class. We can review the foundation's plans during your lunch break. The next morning, I put on my business casual attire, professional but approachable as always. As I drove through the city streets, I thought about success, about appearance versus reality, about the quiet satisfaction of doing things right. A message from James. Meeting with quality control today. Learning to listen this time. Another from Victoria. Starting a podcast about authentic business leadership. Thanks for the inspiration. And finally, one from Emma. Proud of you, salesman. See you at lunch. Sometimes the biggest achievements aren't measured in profit margins or market share. Sometimes they're found in quality products delivered, in family relationships healed, in trust rebuilt step by step. Next appointment, I announced to myself, pulling into the school parking lot. Educational supplies demonstration. A familiar voice. Right on schedule, as always. I smiled, seeing Emma waiting with foundation proposals tucked under her arm. Success isn't about who knows what you own. It's about knowing who you are and being true to that knowledge. Even if who you are is a global supply chain CEO who still makes sales calls. Because sometimes the smallest sales lead to the biggest changes in business, in family, and in life. And those changes are worth more than any empire.